Things are changing in Cuba. Havana's famous old American cars, the Almendrino taxis, all seem to be sporting fresh coats of paint. Paladars, or privately owned restaurants, have prospered. Casas particulares, or private homes offering room and board to the public, have been springing up all over. Our family rented a mid-century modern beach house in the spring of 2014. The beach was a block away, and there was a sparkling pool outside our door. It was a bargain. We were here to experience the Cuban Spring. Downtown Havana was a short, cheap taxi ride away. Cuba, with its managed economy, has long had two currencies: the Cuban peso for Cubans and the convertible peso pegged to the US dollar for visitors. The Cuban peso was to be spent on the peso market, and the markets were unavailable to foreigners. Each vendor has a specialty, but several stalls might carry the same item. Shoppers might choose one stall for bananas, but another for peanuts. The low-key competition between stalls seems to incorporate free enterprise. Drive just 6 miles east of Havana, and you arrive in the suburb of Alamar. Soviet-style apartment blocks were built to alleviate the housing shortage. We see signs of private enterprise in the form of paladars, or privately owned restaurants. El Chanchuero is newly built, and its take on classic Cuban barbacoa is relaxed and creative. We dropped in for an early lunch and were served complimentary shots of rum. Open land lies around Alamar, as well as sweeping views of Havana and the ocean. With Cubans being allowed to buy and sell houses now, one wonders if a real estate boom may be just around the corner. Saroa may not be the end of the road, but it's close.
Traigo una pena en mi sol, una pena que me aterra de ver a mi pobre tierra tratada sin compasión.
We rented rooms at Los Almendros, a casa particular set in a garden. This tropical paradise in Cuba's wine country is low-key, low-stress, and low-cost.
El frito está bien.
No nos ponemos de acuerdo, tan poca gente que somos.
Esta noche de rumba y rumba, esta noche voy a...
Orchiderio Sorolla was built by Don Tomás Felipe, a wealthy Spanish lawyer. The orchid nursery garden was founded in 1943 to honor his daughter.
Me está invitando a bailar. Esta noche me voy de rumba. Esta noche quiero bailar. Esta noche...
The beautiful house of the family is now a museum and has its original furniture and decoration.
Mueve la cintura, ay que sabrosura, me lleva la luna, mi ritmo es una locura, esta noche me voy de rumba, esta noche quiero bailar. Esta noche de rumba y rumba, esta noche voy a gozar.
The spectacular heart of Pinar del Rio, Viñales is surrounded by soaring limestone mojotes. The best tobacco in the world is grown here. We just pulled over to the first palm-thatched drying barn that we saw and walked in. This was the farm of Angel Cruz.
Son 3 meses. 3 months.
Although the bulk of his crop is sold to the government monopoly, Senor Cruz is able to keep a small portion to himself as cigars.
In here drying 4 months.
Cojo un
The
spray.
dried leaves are then sprayed
echo
with anise, rum, and honey, and pressed between palm mats. Fermentation lasts for about 4 months. The cigars that Senor Cruz rolls for himself are, by far, the finest I've ever smoked.
He made those.
Aquí duran 3 años.
In 1989, the Soviet Union dissolved. As a client state, Cuba lost trade and subsidies that the young state had depended on, and consumer goods, including food, were difficult if not impossible to find. My daughter Susanna interpreted, as her mother-in-law Ada told us about the hard times raising her family in the early 1990s.
There was only grapefruit.
For everything.
You would make grapefruit juice, and they would also make beef steak of grapefruit. So of the rind, they would make it like meat, and it would be this much bread per person. And when you try to eat it, it would just sort of disappear because she heard that it was made out of sweet potato.
2 para Giselle, 2 para Yadir.
2 for Yusette, 2 for Yadir. And she would eat just a little bit because she was so hungry.
Y después ella decía, ay, qué mala soy, qué mala
And then
soy.
she would think how bad she was because she was eating her kids' bread.
Que fue un tiempo difícil.
Super fuerte, Ada.
And
The electricity would go out and there would be no water. And then the mosquitoes would come.
fue muy difícil.
It was really hard.
There would be no
The pumps don't work. When there's no electricity, there's no water.
Yo iba muy lejos 2 veces a la semana
She would go very far, two times a week,
a buscarle 2 litros de leche que me vendían unas personas que tenían vacas.
to find 2 liters of milk that from people who have cows.
Pero a veces era tanto lo que se demoraban las guaguas
Sometimes it took so long for the buses to come or any sort of transportation
que yo me levantaba de madrugada
that she would wake up early in the morning
y a veces llegaba a la casa a las 3 de la tarde
and she'd get home around 3 in the afternoon
y la leche se me había echado a perder.
and the milk had gone bad.
Public transportation, but it was huge line, and you see the bus with people hanging outside the bus, you know.
They had people whose job it was to push them in the bus. When the camel bus came around, things got a little bit better because they were bigger
Que
buses.
venía a la bodega y era arroz, frijoles
Rice,
Sal.
beans, salt,
y un poquito de azúcar.
a little
¿ya?
bit of sugar, tobacco, rum.
Y no había donde conseguir las cosas porque no había agromercado, no había nada de por la libre, no existía
There
nada
was
por la libre.
nothing.
Pollo.
She would look out in Alamar and see the boats. She'd go out and see like a white boat and she'd say, "That's the chicken boat." Yeah, like that. I think that boat's bringing chicken.
Fondo no tenía convenios, no sé.
Sometimes the boats would come full with gasoline or chicken or whatever.
But they didn't have the money to pay
Cuban
for it.
didn't have money to pay for it, so they'd leave full.
Sí, pero bueno, ya pasó.
But
Son
it's
experiencias
over.
tristes, pero ya pasó.
Armed guards constantly patrol outside the presidential palace of former Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista.
And then Batista escaped through a tunnel here in the palace.
A delivery truck used by the revolutionaries rests outside, close to the spot that it was riddled by the bullets of the presidential guard. A passionate diorama depicts Che Guevara in the Bolivian jungle. Perhaps this was the moment that he realized he had been betrayed to the Bolivian authorities by the local Communist Party. We passed a satirical gallery with cartoons of Batista, Reagan, Bush the Elder, and Bush the Younger. The street life goes on in Havana, as it has since the year 1515. Although things are changing slowly, they're changing inexorably. What will Havana look like in the next centuries?